Nothing in the Lou Brydges Show is intended to be legal analysis, legal advice, or legal recommendations that would be applicable to your particular situation. Everyone in foreclosure or underwater with their mortgage are encouraged to seek legal counsel for a review of your specific situation. Welcome to the weekly broadcast of the Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about the foreclosure crisis and the greatest financial crime in history that created it. Are you in foreclosure, at risk of foreclosure, or underwater with your mortgage? Do you know someone who is? Every week on this show, you'll get real answers from a real attorney. Lou Brydges will explain options in the foreclosure process and talk about defective mortgages, mortgage restructuring, loan modification, short sale negotiation, and discuss what to look for when choosing a foreclosure defense attorney. Lou is an experienced foreclosure defense lawyer on the front lines of mortgage defense and litigation. Lou's dedicated to helping you keep your property. And now it's time for the Lou Brydges Show and the truth about foreclosure. Here's your host, Lou Brydges.
Good morning, Chicago. Another beautiful Saturday morning, and we've got a lot to cover in the show this week. There's no way we're going to get through all this, Mike. I'm here with Debbie Schreiber, my producer, Mike Main, my wingman.
Hello, Chicago.
And Mike and I were getting ready for the show last night and going through all the news reports and everything, and there's just no way we can get all through this. So let me just...
However, you'll be able to follow along at Facebook.com, The Lou Brydges Show, and the things we don't get to here, we'll get to there.
Yes, what we don't cover here, we'll get to there, and this would be the week to check it out, because the news and reports is just piling on. The lies are starting to just pile up, and it's so beautiful to see this all collapsing. But we're going to start the show, as we do all shows, with a reference to reading the Thomas Jefferson quote. Thomas Jefferson, 207 years ago, wrote, he wrote, "In light of the current financial crisis, I believe that the banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow the banks to control the issue of currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and the corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all their property until their children wake up homeless on the land, on the continent their forefathers conquered." And you see, that's what's happening. You see, the banks, banks should be just banks, a place where you put the money and they could, they collect the deposits. But when Glass-Steagall was repealed and banks are allowed to get into investing, you can manipulate things when you have the power of all that funds and to issue debt, which is a way to print currency. When you give the banks that power, they can start to control things. And it's everything now, from controlling the LIBOR interest rates to, well, let me just read you some of the news reports from this past week. The Securities and Exchange Commission has charged the Bank of America with fraud in an RMBS offering. The Department of Justice sues Bank of America for defrauding investors in connection with the sale of over $850 million of residential mortgage-backed securities. Bank of America accused of racketeering in a lawsuit. And this is based on the statements from the Bank of America employees. It involves an ongoing federal lawsuit in Massachusetts involving the sandbagging and the scamming that on the modification programs. How Bank of America in their modification department were giving bonuses to employees to put people into foreclosure, to give them the runaround on the modification. And if anyone of you have ever applied for a loan modification, you know what I'm talking about. Later in the show, we're going to talk about what you can do about that if you've been given a runaround in modification, or even if you got a modification that wasn't a good deal, or it turns out not to be a good deal. There's some other things you can do. J.P. Morgan faces criminal and civil probes over the mortgages. You got to understand, people. The reason you're $100,000 underwater is because it was a artificial balloon created by Wall Street in order to get you $100,000 underwater, so that you would default. Lies of the banks coming back to haunt them, reports Living Lies and Neil Garfeld. And everybody should check out the Living Lies Neil Garfeld website. Neil Garfeld, the grandfather of foreclosure defense attorneys. Also, StopForeclosureFraud.com is another great website.
And don't forget FightIllinoisForeclosures.com.
FightIllinoisForeclosures.com is our website. Living Lies and Stop Foreclosure out of Florida, where all this kind of started. With the real creditor stand up. Denver foreclosure attorney faces federal sanctions for the bill padding. And I've been telling people, and I've been telling the judges for 5 years now, These are fraudulent, forged, fabricated documents. These assignments, these allonges, there's no need for any of them. They are all whistleblowers. And now, with our more sophisticated investigation techniques and our access to the Bloomberg terminal, which has more information than, I don't know, any place else in the world, it ought to, for $1,000 a month.
I don't know. The NSA may have a little more.
Yeah, the NSA may have. Thank you, Mike. Yes, apparently the National Security Administration has been, well, I'd rather have them be over. Anyway, Bank of America whistleblowing bombshells. We've reported on that. We were told to lie. PNC Bank is subpoenaed on foreclosure costs. The Department of Justice probing foreclosure mortgage. This is all in the past week. New Bank of America whistleblowers, more whistleblowers. See, I knew that would be, once the whistleblowers started, it would be a tsunami. U.S. regulators have reached an $885 million settlement with UBS Bank over allegations the bank misrepresented mortgage-backed securities and unlawfully and fraudulently induced homeowners into mortgages for more than the property was worth based on the manipulation of the appraisals. J.P. Morgan. Now, here's an interesting article from the New York Times. This is actually a couple weeks ago. J.P. Morgan, I'm going to read to you from the New York Times, written by Jessica Silver Greenberg and Ben Protis, two great writers that we try to keep contact with and share stories with. And J.P. Morgan Chase is pulling out its checkbook to help mend frayed relationships with the government. But its new conciliatory approach, a departure for the bank and its leader, Jamie Dimon, who generally has taken a hard line with authorities, is yielding mixed results. Government officials, stung by the bank's past display of hubris, may drive up the price of settlements, or worse, resist the overtures altogether. The hefty payout started on Tuesday when J.P. Morgan struck a $410 million deal with the nation's top energy regulator, which had accused and proven that the bank was devising manipulative schemes to transform money-losing power plants into powerful profit centers by using the regulations. Abusing the regulations. The agreement was a record fine for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, whose most recent settlement with the big banks totaled only $1.6 million. So $1.6 million, now they paid $410 million, because what they do is they take control over the energy and then hold it back from the market. When you have that type of control, you can manipulate markets, as they did in the mortgage and the housing industry, and you can artificially drive up the cost of energy by holding back energy from the market, by taking control of these power plants,
essentially artificially inflating demand.
And and the same thing with the commodities. The story we talked about last week of hoarding commodities and essential goods. Now, Fabrice Torre, of course, was convicted 2 weeks ago now of fraud. This is a guy that was making, at age 27, was making $150 million a year, creating nothing more than paper. And the paper he was creating, the whole scheme of the Fabrice Torre thing, as you have to understand, is he gives incentives to originators to get mortgages that were far greater than the property is worth and that people are going to default on. Give them 0%, he says, and tell them in 2 years when the interest rate, the adjustable rate kicks in, they'll get another 0%. And that their home will have gone up 10, 20% in value, because homes are going up 10% a year back then, in 1998 to 2008. And they'll be able to refinance and take out, $200 or $20,000 or $40,000. But get them into the mortgage. And people want to have a nice house where there's nice schools and things. So, but at the same time, he knew that this is going to be a large number of defaults in this 2,500 mortgage-backed securities. So he's putting it together so they can buy a bunch of these credit default swaps derivatives, making a bet on what they sold to investors would fail. Now, we're getting close to the end of the segment. When you come, I want you to stay with us through sports and weather, because when we come back, we're going to pay homage to Charles Ferguson, the great writer who wrote the Academy Award, who directed or produced the Academy Award-winning film Inside Job. And if you haven't seen Inside Job, you really need it. It gives you an overall view of this crime, this greatest financial crime spree in history. It wasn't just one crime. It was a whole crime spree by Wall Street investment banks for 10 years. And it's ongoing today in the foreclosures and in the servicing fees that they charge for mortgages and foreclosure, and how they force people into foreclosure, and how they give people the runaround on the modifications. But see, the truth comes out the truth just keeps coming out, and the lies need more and more lies to cover them up. And the truth comes out, and so there are solutions. There are the things you can do. But stay with us. When we come back, it's going to be very dramatic. We're going to play the trailer to Inside Job. I'm going to give you a little commentary on the side.
And we'll have that trailer also up on our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Lou Brydges Show. That's Bridges with a Y.
And if you stop by my office, anybody who stops by my office, we got about 50 copies of the. And I'm always giving them out. My bookkeeper and accountant are just livid with me because I give away too many copies. I've probably given away 100 copies of this, but it's a very important film, and everyone should see it. Living Lies, Why We Are Not Repairing Infrastructure and Other Matters of Interest. It just goes on and on. I did get through 1/3 of the news reports about all the crimes and.
Have news to report to us? 224-513-1231. That's 224-513-1231. You can also
stay with us. We're going to be back with Inside Job.
Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show with Louis Brydges, one of Chicago's leading foreclosure defense attorneys. Here's Lou to tell you what to look for when hiring a foreclosure defense attorney and how to avoid being conned on AM 560. The Answer.
Welcome back, Chicago. Another beautiful Saturday morning. We didn't get through all the news from the past week about all the fraud and misconduct and criminal misdeeds that the banks have been accused of just this past week and actually convicted of and brought to a trial, and all the Fabry-Torre judgment, and it just goes on and on and on because, this all started about 5 years ago this coming September, and we're at the 5-year anniversary, and we're still in a situation in which there are 20 million American families underwater, paying more for their home than they should be because of the artificial bubble created by Wall Street, because Wall Street was not only making more money by selling the mortgage-backed securities for far more than they really were worth, but also betting that there would be a eventual burst of the bubble. The old Holland tulip situation, which those of you who are taking Economics 101 in college remember the Holland tulips. Well, that's kind of what the housing bubble was. It was an artificially created balloon so that very few people could profit at the expense of millions of American families. And now you've got millions of American families struggling with an underwater mortgage or dispossessed of their homes and relocated. And I go down to King County, Florida in the winter, and the entire subdivisions are vacant. Homes are deteriorating in mold and lizards and graffiti and crack. And meanwhile, the school buses go down Motel Row and stop at the Walmart parking lots. And that's going to spread and spread because the housing market is not going to ever come. This artificial bubble is going to be another generation before we forget the lessons of history. And what got me started in this, I've always had been, in Chancery Court my whole career. I'd been, a construction industry attorney and was involved in mechanics liens, which are in Chancery Court. But I saw this documentary film by Charles Ferguson. It won the Academy Award back in 2010. It was made in 2009 about the 2008 crash. And Debbie is going to play the official trailer from it. I'm going to give a little commentary in the background. But Inside Job is the name of the movie. It's a documentary film. For those of you who don't want documentaries, documentary films are a wonderful source of information and entertainment at the same time. I am a great advocate. I probably watch 3 or 4 documentary films every week. It's my form of entertainment.
And this one's really compelling.
This is, won the Academy Award for Best Documentary of the Year. So without further ado, Debbie, will you play the official trailer to Inside Job? We're going to pay homage to Charles Ferguson on this upcoming 5th anniversary of the foreclosure crisis debacle.
Share prices continued to tumble.
This is September 11th.
Forced to declare itself bankrupt.
The largest single point drop.
The regulators, they had the power to do every case that I made when I was state attorney general.
Too bad he couldn't keep his pecker in his pants.
We are watching this tsunami coming.
Christine Lagarde.
Massive private gains at public loss.
A financial engineer built dreams. When those dreams turn out to be nightmares, other people pay for it.
Bear Stearns, Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers.
Yeah, you bet they did.
What was happening?
You bet
what
they
do you
did.
think about selling securities which your own people think
This is Sam Fold.
Crap? Does that bother you?
As a hypothetical?
No, this is real.
That was Sam Fold from Goldman Sachs.
What do you think of Wall Street incomes these days?
Excessive.
By hundreds of millions of dollars.
Millions of dollars.
In bonuses alone.
Because he was smart.
He thought he was smart.
Chuck Prince famously said, "We have to dance until the music stops." Actually, the music had stopped already when he said that.
At some point, I used the word Armageddon.
We're on the brink. We were on the brink.
Impulsive. I see a lot of cocaine use, prostitution.
That's why I get my coke snorting, whoremongering Wall Street investment banker.
These guys know that they were doing something dangerous?
I think they did.
Oh, yeah.
I don't hear confessions.
What can we believe in? There's nothing we can trust anymore.
We had a whole group of people looking at this.
Oh, yeah, right.
You can't be serious. If you would have looked,
they own the regulatory agencies.
It's a Wall Street government.
Why do you think there isn't a more systematic investigation being undertaken?
Because then you would find the culprits.
I don't believe I have to discuss
This is my favorite part here. This is my favorite part. Listen to this.
You come to us today telling us we're sorry,
Senate committee
we won't do
hearings.
it again. Trust us. Well, I have some people in my constituency that actually robbed some of your banks. And they say the same thing.
Trust me, I won't do it again. Trust me.
I never heard him mention those things.
All right. Well,
Could we turn this off?
Yeah, you bet they want to turn this off. Well, that's the trailer to Inside Job, which is a movie you should all see, a documentary film about the manipulation of the housing industry in the United States by very, very few small select people. And for those of you who don't know, I'll say again. To put it in very simple, very general terms, this is not a situation that was created by 56 million Americans waking up one morning and deciding to commit bank fraud that day. 56 million Americans, however, were the victims of bank fraud by the originators. You see, the banks that are going to be servicing the mortgage, it's not their money. They loan other people's money. They loan pension fund, public employee pension fund money, and they're going to be the servicer of the mortgage. And in the pooling and service agreements, the PSAs, for those of you on the inside, the service fees that they are going to charge for servicing these mortgages are 30 times, for mortgages that are in foreclosure, are 30 times what they charge for mortgages that are performing. And if you take Wells Fargo, for example, and they service 7 million mortgages, if 7 million mortgages are performing, they make about $10 per mortgage for opening the check envelope and clearing the check and doing what a bank should do. That's $70 million a month. Nice little chunk of change. But if 1 billion of those mortgages are in foreclosure, they charge $300 a month for those 1 million in foreclosure. That's $300 million on that 1 million alone and $60 million on the other 6 million. So you go from $70 million a month to $360 million a month. The difference of $290 million. Allow me to call it $300 million for purposes of making the math easy. That comes to $3.6 billion per year in revenues, which is exactly how much Wells Fargo has reported in revenues from servicing mortgages in foreclosure. That is why they sabotaged the HAMP modification program. That is why they've been pushing people into foreclosure. That is why you've been getting the runaround. There's something you can do. That is why the whistleblowers have come out and said we were told to lie to customers. We were told them to tell them their application is in process, or that we don't have all the documents,
and to ignore the foreclosure process because you're going to get a modification.
And to ignore the foreclosure process because you're going to get a modification, or just wait. Don't worry about or you can't get a modification because you're current, and all kinds of lies. Because the law, because this crime is ongoing today, and the judges around the country. Let me read you a few more of the things from our researchers have compiled from this past week. There's a lot of judges now around the country that are really onto this, and I'm not just talking about Judge Rakoff. Published Glaske versus Bank of America, 5th Appellate District of securitization failed. New York trust law applies. Quiet title and a host of other causes reversed and remanded. Homeowner utterly defeats J.P. Morgan Chase. Korea versus U.S. Bank. IndyBank mortgages servicers Alex Coleman counsel never entered the copy of the lost note and assignment. They don't have the note. Borrowers, here's out of the 9th Circuit in California. Borrowers can sue Wells Fargo over mortgage modifications. By the way, people, if you've had a modification and and you just were forced into it just to kind of save the house, and you're still way underwater, and you think, well, I had my one modification, there's no way I can get restructuring. Think again. We got this past week, how many restructurings did we get this past week? Like 5? I mean, from 57,000 to one was like 80,000. And I know one of the associate attorneys came in and said, he said, they just agreed to a modification. And I said, don't just, think I really, would urge people, every modification, that restructuring that we get, we have a mortgage industry specialist who is on staff with us now full time to examine it and review it. Because we're lawyers. And, we can give you the legal advice. We can make this in a binding enforceable agreement and get the lawsuit dismissed with prejudice and make the new agreement a substitute for the old agreement so that if there's some problem with the new agreement. But, the analysis of, and so we have a mortgage, somebody with 35 years experience as a mortgage broker, as an underwriter, he's done everything.
He's a bright guy.
Very bright guy. And he's very helpful, and he helps us with the modification. We have a whole, staff of paralegals that do nothing but process the modifications and make sure, and they know the regulations. We have seminars that we teach these people the regulations about the modification procedures and everything. And I'll tell you about the attorneys we have. We got some really sharp attorneys now, and
join us at Facebook / The Lou Brydges Show.
Do not give up your home. And if you're under what we give everybody, a free consultation. Mike will give you the numbers, but everybody gets a free consultation. And if you ask, you probably get a free copy of Inside Job, the documentary film.
224-513-1231. That's 224-513-1231.
Do not give up the land. Never give up the land.
Lou Brydges of the law firm Brydges & O & Associates, one of the leading foreclosure defense firms in the Chicago area, rejoins you now on the Lou Brydges Show. Here's Lou on how you might avoid foreclosure and deal with a mortgage that's underwater.
Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show. I hope you, if you missed our segment about Inside Job, please, check out the film. And you can watch the trailer on YouTube, or you can watch the trailer on our website.
Our Facebook page, facebook.com / The Lou Brydges Show. That's Bridges with a Y, The Lou Brydges Show. And the telephone number is 224-513-1231. And I hear, Lou, actually, that you've got a birthday coming up this week. Another year older.
Bring that up.
Another year older.
Well, you had to bring that up. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. I do. I'm another year old, another year wiser, hopefully. I don't know about that. But, I will say on my birthday that my birthday is a very significant date in American history because there's 2 other events that occurred within a day or two of my birthday. And I'm going to, since it's next week, August 27th, I'm going to share those with you. When I was 8 years old, was August 27th, 1963, and which is one of the most important dates of American history. I think it's one of the 3 most powerful things ever said that really capsulize what our little experiment called democracy, United States of America, is all about. I think the Declaration of Independence, the Gettysburg Address, and the I Have a Dream speech are the 3 most important things because, I was 8 years old and I was starting to get aware of things, and I was always very interested in the news and politics and things that were going on. And obviously that was the height of the civil rights movement. And so that was something I was interested in. And I believe that, that August 27th, 1963, my 8th birthday, was a huge turning point because, quite frankly, who could possibly disagree with the notion of judging people by the content of their character rather than anything else, really?
Yeah.
And at that point, it's like I think a lot of Americans that were maybe against the civil rights movement started to think how can I be against that? And it was spoken so eloquently and so dramatically on the in the backdrop of the Lincoln Memorial. And by the way, I had visited Washington that summer, my eighth birthday. My dad, my mom had died, and my dad took me to Washington, and we just kind of moseyed around town in June. And I wish we'd been there in August to see the speech. But I saw the speech that night on television, and I had seen that shimmering, the reflecting pools and the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial. And where Dr. Martin Luther King gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. But I really think, in my view, and I study this stuff, I believe that the Declaration of Independence, the words, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, all endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. and the Gettysburg Address, that it is rather for us the living here to take from those who gave the last full measure of their devotion and renewed dedication, that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall never perish from this earth. And I have a dream that someday my children will grow up in a land in which they are judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin or anything else for that matter. And that really seemed, I think, was the turning point in the civil rights movement. And, people talk about my generation and call us long-haired hippies and things. And, yeah, there was a lot of drug use and a lot of,
free
things
love.
A lot of stuff that turned out to be not quite so, good. But there was also a lot of very dedicated people and a lot of change now. I mean, a lot of changes that have occurred. And, for all the people that talk about how bad things are and everything, there has never been a point in human history in which people were as free, had more opportunity, better, more tolerance of conflicting views, a more diverse, eclectic, vibrant society. And it is a diverse, vibrant, raucous, messy, there's a lot of shouting back and forth, and it's a democracy. And, democracy is never going to be neat and clean. And it is a messy, raucous, form of government that involves a lot of conflict and argument and debate. And because we think that when the truth comes out, you see, the lies will not withstand scrutiny. And that is why, instead of name calling, let's examine everybody's idea. Let's, engage in a discourse in which we judge things by the content of their content rather than, just name calling and, you're a liberal or you're a conservative. And so what? I mean, we're talking about an issue. What, maybe some of the conservatives are right and some of the liberals are right on some others. And what is it with this labels anyway? Can't we just discuss the merits of this particular issue without regard to name calling or anything? Winston Churchill once said that democracy is a very messy, raucous form of government that involves a lot of compromise and debate and discourse, and things are never completely settled. It might very well be the worst form of government one might imagine, until, of course, one compares it to all the other forms of government. And but I will comment that I've never taken a real position on gun control, but I will comment that two of the countries with the most strict gun control are Syria and Europe, or Syria and Egypt. And that's what happens when only the government has the guns. You do have that problem of what's going on in Syria and Egypt. But I know that's going to get us some calls.
Well, join us at facebook.com/The Lou Brydges Show.
Just an observation. I'm not making any conclusions. I'm just saying they got real strict gun control in Syria and Egypt.
They do.
We now return to the Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about the foreclosure crisis and the greatest financial crime in history. Here's Lou Brydges, an attorney on the front lines of the ongoing battle for our land.
Yeah, welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show. We've been having we've had a wide-ranging show. We've talked about the Inside Job. We've talked about August 27th. The other significant event that occurred on my birthday. 50 years ago was the I Have a Dream speech, and, changed my life. And, I've been inspired by it ever since. And, it almost brings tears to my eyes and makes me proud to be an American. And, the whole backdrop of the Lincoln Memorial and the reflecting pool and everything. But the other thing is that 40 years ago today, when I turned 13, I was so into, I wanted to be a newspaper reporter. I wanted to be an investigative journalist. And I still to this day, I love, investigating things and getting to the bottom of things and, these complex conundrums and mysteries and crimes and things. And that's, one of the reasons, quite frankly, I great reward from helping people keep their homes and keep their families in the schools and maintain the communities and to fight the banks and to work out restructurings where there's a fair deal. We aren't asking that anybody get their home, free and clear of a mortgage, or that the mortgage, we're not saying there isn't no obligation to pay, but it should be a fair obligation based on the true fair market value of the property, not the artificially inflated value that was placed on it by the appraisers. But the other thing that happened on my birthday 40 years ago, and it just proves the power of the truth, and I've been an advocate of the truth ever since, because the truth, as I've said, is the transcendent force. It is the sword of Excalibur. Lies, its opponents will defeat themselves. The truth is so powerful that you sometimes don't even need to take it out, the sword out of its sheath in order to prevail, because the lies will bury themselves. And 40 years ago, that was proven. Two guys who became my heroes with nothing more than indigo ink and paper made from pulp from trees. So indigo ink and tree pulp, and the truth brought down the most powerful man and the most powerful country in the world by writing the truth, by taking that indigo ink and writing the truth on that pressed pulp. And Woodward and Bernstein, of course, and others, Anderson and John Anderson, the reporter whose first name escapes me now. For 40 years ago, that Richard Nixon resigned from the presidency. And here's the thing. Richard Nixon was a brilliant man and did a lot of great things as a president, and had nothing to do with the Watergate break-in. But it just goes to show it's always the lies. It's the cover-up that reveals what you're all about. Because when they cover up, if Richard Nixon had just come out on the next day, the day after the Watergate burglars were arrested, and said, "Oh my God, what the hell is going on? Who is working in our campaign? I want a thorough review of the personnel working in our campaign. We're not going to have any more of this dirty tricks. This is, this was a horrendous act on their part. It's not the policy of the campaign. These are a couple of maverick, overzealous goofballs who thought they were going to gain something. We got this election wrapped up. I mean, George McGovern's our opponent. For Christ's sake, I was a big George McGovern fan, but he didn't have a chance. And we're breaking into their. But instead, they tried to cover it up. And every lie requires 3 more lies to cover it up, and every one of those 3 more. And you start doing things 3 times 3 times 3, and exponentially. Pretty soon the lies just bury themselves. And what came out is, there's a slush fund for other dirty tricks. And, if you followed the Watergate story, which I did 40 years ago this summer as a 13-year-old and, wanting to be a newspaper reporter, I even had my own little notepad, that I carried around, the reporter's notepad. How I got on the wayward track to law school, I don't recall, quite frankly, right now. I have to think about that. But, it's the lies. And so my birthday, of all things, two of the most, what I consider one of the most momentous days in history happened. I think it might have been the 27th or the 28th. I'm not sure, but right around my birthday. My birthday is the 27th. And you got the I Have a Dream speech and Richard Nixon resigning. After several months earlier saying, "I am not a crook," which begs the question: Why are you, the President of the United States, having to get on the air and announce that you are not a crook? I mean, shouldn't you be above that? But and again, it wasn't the break-in; it was the cover-up, the lies, and that's what's happening to the banks these days a lot. The whistleblowers coming out, and the judges around the country, Judge Rakoff, and And the big case that Mike is so excited about is very complicated, but what it involves is, you see, most instances, about half the mortgages are private securitized. And the trusts are either New York or Delaware trusts, and they're covered by New York or Delaware trust law, mostly New York trust law, which is very developed trust law. And you see, there's a distinction very important for purposes of the law between void and voidable. And, a trust is a legal fiction created by a declaration of trust, and it can only do what it's declared to do, and it must comply with the law. And the declarations of trust are in the pooling and service agreement, because you see, the banks are the servicer, and they're also the trustee in most instances. Wall Street banks put together the mortgage-backed securities and got you in way over your head. And the 12 major, and again, we're always talking the 12 major banks that are going to service the mortgages. They're the trustee often also, and the servicer. But if the purported transfer of the note and mortgage into the trust is void, then it didn't happen. It's just a fiction, which doesn't mean there's not a note and mortgage, but it means the bank servicing that has been attempting to collect a debt is attempting to collect a debt on behalf of a principal that doesn't own the note and mortgage, which brings up Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, Fair Debt Credit Reporting Act, which means that you may have a claim against the banks.
The bank suing doesn't have standing.
The bank suing doesn't have standing.
Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show with Louis Brydges, one of Chicago's leading foreclosure defense attorneys. Here's Lou to tell you what to look for when hiring a foreclosure defense attorney and how to avoid being conned on AM 560. The Answer.
All right, welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show. I'm here with Mike Main, and if you would listen, if you would mention the show to your friends, so we can get some more listeners. We're doing fairly well, and I'd like to see the ratings up a little more, but we're doing pretty well. And the show is about the truth, and to promote dialogue about the truth. And we focus, of course, on the major banks and all the crimes that they're committing, and the Thomas Jefferson quote about the banks being more dangerous to the American people than standing armies, more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. And, I want to be very clear. We're talking about the major national banks, the 12 major national banks, J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo.
Too big to fail, too big to prosecute.
Yeah, the ones that I can say on the air are criminal organizations. They all have multiple criminal indictments and criminal proceedings and law enforcement proceedings by regulatory agencies. And so I can say the criminal organizations that are the national banks that have become way too powerful since the repeal of Glass-Steagall, and they've taken over branches of the government. The Office of Comptroller of the Currency, that's supposed to be the regulator, is absolutely exposed itself as nothing more than a puppet for the major banks.
Fannie Mae.
I mean, refusing the representative of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the Fed, representatives of the Federal Reserve and the Office of Comptroller of the Currency testifying before a joint congressional committee, the Senate Banking and the Senate Finance Committee. Elizabeth Warren, a former professor, questioning them about what exactly did you guys find or was found by the independent foreclosure reviews that you allowed the banks to conduct in response to the accusations by attorneys like Lou Brydges that there was, she didn't say Lou Brydges, but she could have mentioned my name because we are in contact with her office, about all the fraud and the fabricated and forged documents and the frauds upon the court in the foreclosure process that you accomplished. And the answer was to a United States senator from an employee of the Office of Comptroller of the Currency, a federal agency that is my employee, or your employee. He said, "I'm sorry, Senator, that's privileged information." Privileged? There's an attorney-client privilege, we learned in law school. There's a physician-patient privilege. There's a priest-confessor privilege. There's no such thing as a privilege of what your internal review found of criminal actions that you committed. For the backdrop, we allowed the banks to conduct an independent foreclosure review using their own auditing firms to whom they pay billions of dollars a year. And they cherry-picked the cases they looked for, they reviewed, and they did a very suspect, superficial examination. And they still found, in some instances, as many as 80% of the foreclosure judgments that a particular servicer had obtained were based on forged documents, fraudulent documents, fabricated documents, robo-signed documents, gaps in the chain of title, lack of standing, some defect.
And they didn't want to tell.
What you can do is force modification and restructuring. The forced restructuring is the key. Call us for a free consultation.
223-513. 224-513-1231.
You've been listening to the weekly radio broadcast of the Lou Brydges Show with attorney Louis Brydges, telling the truth about foreclosure. Have you received threats of foreclosure? Are you in a foreclosure right now, seeking a loan modification, considering strategic default, or any other legal action? Know and protect your rights, and do not give up the land. Lou Brydges' passion is to help you keep your home and achieve your legal goals. To receive a free consultation, which may help you decide how to defend against foreclosure, understand your options, and learn what to look for in choosing a foreclosure defense attorney, call 224-513-1231. That's 224-513-1231. Or visit FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. That's FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. Get real answers from a real foreclosure defense firm and discover the legal tools at your disposal. Tune into AM 560 The Answer next Saturday morning at 8 for The Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about foreclosure.